What if there is a simple, surefire way to profit from any situation through careful analysis and observation that made possible your benefit no matter what? Period. Hi, I'm Justin Hitt with Sustainable Wealth Secrets. It's very important you understand this powerful and unique concept for analyzing the truth of a situation so that you obtain the facts necessary to profit. You profit from any situation by understanding this truth. First off, there is a spectrum of belief, a spectrum that goes to the right, a spectrum that goes to the left, and then there's a centrist view. Within that spectrum, there is a both truth A and a truth B about the same situation. So if a car accident happened, you've got the driver of the vehicle, you've got an observer. Both will have truths about the situation that may or may not be the actual observed facts. So let's say you've got the driver of the vehicle, you've got an individual who observed the accident, and you've got a video camera at that intersection. Okay, you're going to have observed facts that the video camera is going to show you exactly what happened. Anybody can look at that camera and come up with their own truth of the situation. You're going to have the person who experienced the accident inside the vehicle, most directly and emotionally impacted by the accident. And then you're going to have this observer who may casually be doing something else. They could have been looking at their phone and then they heard a noise, looked up, and then their mind pieced together all the information about what they claim to have seen or not have seen at the particular accident. When you objectively look at this situation, you have to assess the weather, the conditions of the situation, whether the driver was under the influence or not, whether the observer was under the influence or not. There are many factors that go into this beyond the beliefs, the cognitive abilities, and the previous experiences of the individual. Now, this is very important. You may be asking, well, what does profits have to do with this kind of critical thinking and understanding observed and actual truths? Well, there is always opportunity in chaos. And when you have many truths that are along a spectrum of left or right, okay, now it doesn't mean the political spectrum necessarily a left or right. There's different views that have a variety of intensities or polarities in a situation. So for example, if the person was driving under the influence and this would be their third DUI that would cause them to lose their driver's license, they're going to be on an end of that spectrum to protect their interests. Where if the observer's children were killed in a car accident by a drunk driver, they're going to be on a different spectrum when they get up to the vehicle and smell alcohol. Okay, so one is going to observe or perceive the situation as an irresponsible driver, while the other person will be trying to be protective and demonstrate their level of responsibility, the behavior that they were opposite of what they were actually doing. It's going to give you versions of the truth along a polarizing spectrum. If you're observing a theft, and you believe somebody has stolen something, the other person may actually believe they have liberated the item as part of a reparation scheme. There's just different ways to look at it. When you can step back and observe both the spectrum of belief, the two sides to every story, and also understand that the combined story and situation is a neutral, meaning that all perspectives cancel it out. It's kind of neutral. You can then make the observation for the opportunity. Now, in the car accident example, we have an opportunity for a lawyer to represent each side. We have an opportunity for a judge to make a judgment based on the arguments. Altogether, we have evidence, we have analysis, we have an outcome. When you're looking at the stock market, for example, you can look at what is the news saying, what are the numbers showing me? That's two sides of the truth. The news has an objective of getting viewers and may tend to be a little bit more sensational. The facts really have no objective, so they're kind of in the center. Now, you may have industry leaders that are on the opposite side of the news that are saying, hey, yes, while the news is talking about fire and brimstone, we've hedged our bets in a certain way, and if you get in today, we can win. You have to be able to look at it across that spectrum, because when you can objectively look at the opportunity across the spectrum, you can see what others cannot see. See, when you have embraced the truth, there's a cognitive bias to think anything different. See, a limited understanding is the rich get richer. See, when someone says the rich get richer, the poor are getting poorer, it is a very narrow scope of understanding. The truth is the rich get richer because they have the skills to do so. And one such skill is critical thinking, how to objectively look at a situation and find the opportunity. See, a lawyer looking at a car crash sees an opportunity. They don't see a car crash. Now, you might argue that there's an insensitivity in that. There's an inhumane view of that. But again, if you put it all together, it's really neutral. It cancels itself out. If it was a teenager, young driver in the car accident, and it was observed by a parent of teenagers, that's a different perspective than the previous example. You may have a lawyer that advocates against drunk driving, and you have a lawyer that, takes a few too many drinks on the weekends and drives drunk. Those are different ends of a spectrum. Altogether, there's an opportunity for a politician. They would come in and say, oh, look, we need new laws and regulations. All these people coming together makes the jungle neutral. It's neutral as a whole. Once you can find that balance, you can then look at the opportunity. You can find out where there's a need in the marketplace, or there's an opportunity to leverage in an outcome that you desire. So the rich get richer because they have the skills to do so. Well, what about the poor? So the poor are only more poor compared to the rich. Yet some poor are more rich than compared to other poor. See, that's a very neutral statement. If you take all the people in the world and you put them on a spectrum, left to right, let's say the left side of the spectrum is the poorest of the poor, and the right side of the spectrum is the richest of the rich. Yes, there will be inequities. There will be all these things people talk about. But you can then segment that list to see that the rich in the United States are richer than the richest people in a sub-Saharan African country. The poor in the United States are richer than the poor in a sub-Saharan African country. Yet the neighboring country in the same continent could have just as much diversity in the spread of equity or wealth or poorness as anybody else. But the underlying truth is for that locality, for that situation, the rich there know how to generate revenue and the poor don't. Now, of course, this is only on a measure of dollars. What other profits might there be in the situation? Well, there could be a quality of living. There are people who would be considered poor by outside measures, yet live very, very well. The priests at the Vatican, for example, don't get a tremendous salary. The monks give up all of their worldly possessions, yet they have power, respect, even protection that they wouldn't normally have in the outside world. An executive of a company making $20 million a year, $30 million a year, might have a lot of income, but has a very limited public persona and a very limited means to interact in general. They're open to liability, they're open to lawsuits, and they can't do a lot of the things that they want to do. They may even be making a high salary, $1 million a year, and spending $2 million a year maintaining a lifestyle because they're hanging out with the $20 million folks. So when people start comparing, they're comparing for their own reasons, not for the discovery of the truth that unlocks the profit or the opportunity. Now, there are various ways to look at this. You can use network diagrams to look at it. You can look at what influences what. So, for example, with climate change, there's a lot of desire to run solar panels. So solar manufacturing companies are getting a lot of federal funding. They're getting a lot of investment funds. But nobody really sat down and looked at it end to end. What is the carbon impact of manufacturing a solar panel? So they look at the carbon impact of the oil industry. That's one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, they have the solar industry, and they're using one set of measures for the oil industry and another set of measures for the solar industry. And see, if you normalize the measures, meaning equally measure both sides with the same factors, what is the carbon production? What is the carbon footprint? What is the flow of energy? Where is the costs located? So a lot of carbon costs are in the transportation. Well, both sides have transportation factors, except on the oil side, you can run it through a pipeline. You can't run solar panels through a pipeline. You got to manufacture the solar panels somewhere, ship them on site, and install them. The pipeline, though, has construction costs. So you want to do a side-by-side comparison. Once you do the side-by-side comparison, you often can find relationships that demonstrate where there's additional value in the supply chain, for example, yet someone's not leveraging it. So for the mining of the minerals and materials necessary to produce the solar panels, you might find there's a gap between the cost of mining. Maybe it has a low cost of mining. Now you want to find out why. They could be using slave labor, but they have a low cost of mining. And then there's a marketplace for the materials that's increasing. You may want to buy up the minerals or the rights to the minerals or the land where the minerals can be, so that when the demand increases, or as the demand increases, you're going to be in the right position to profit. There's premises and responses. Some folks will say the earth is overpopulated, and the response is to save the earth, we need to save people. But the argument might be that, well, we have diseases that kill off a large number of people, and if the earth is overpopulated, then just let the people die off. It's kind of the planet taking care of itself. What's the truth in that situation? So we can lay out the system. All systems will seek equilibrium, and that's where we get the neutral. So the neutral isn't that the relationship between the different truths and factors sums to zero. No, it sums to an equilibrium. That equilibrium gives us a neutral. What we're looking for to find the profit and opportunity is where there are slight off balances, or there's or changes in that system. We want to, again, observe the equilibrium. That's the normal. And then we want to have measures that indicate where there's differences with the normal. And the normal is a temporary state. So sometimes the markets are going to be abnormal and they're going to be overbought. So the S&P 500 ETF fund overbought, we know is going to drop because the price is inflated by the demand. And so you can get ahead of that with short sells. You can get ahead of that by liquidating your portfolio and moving someplace else where it's underbought, where the market value is different. But again, it's truth, it's evidence, it's beliefs. Understanding these things in analysis helps you discover the opportunity. Now, here's the problem. The human brain wants to take shortcuts. So you're going to see patterns, either they're real patterns or they're observed patterns, just like the changing the observer in the car accident. The video camera is always going to have the same picture, which would be dependent, I guess, on the angle and the weather visibility and a lot of factors there. But you can change out observers and get completely different situations. You need to have the skill, not the physical tools. You can do all this on pen and paper, but the skill to think deeply about the situation, develop that equilibrium or understand that equilibrium, and then start drilling down into the aspects. And I'll give you one practical example before we wrap up. I was working with a client who wanted to invest in aerospace. And they wanted to get into these companies that were real popular, and they wanted to but they were kind of late. And I said, well, look, we don't have to invest in the aerospace industry to profit from the aerospace industry. Let's look at their supply chain. And to make a long story short, we drilled down the supply chain and we found a manufacturer of consoles. So they actually did the consoles in military aircraft, the space station. They did the consoles in the NASA crafts and a lot of the stuff in the control centers and on the space shuttle. And so they were kind of a thread throughout lots of the space industry. And they had a backlog of 5 years worth of product. Now, we did further investigation and realized that their backlog was fully funded and they were seeking outside investments. So now this wasn't a private equity opportunity. They were already kind of publicly traded. They were kind of a penny stock at the time. But we identified that they're in so many different places. They were even in some of the Boeing aircraft for transportation. So we looked at them particularly. Now, it wasn't as big of an opportunity as a SpaceX. It wasn't as big of an opportunity as some of these other things that have come along since then. But by taking the big picture and drilling down the components and the contributing factors, we discovered a truth about that aerospace market that was more universal than other truths in the same market. So it was more of an objective fact that multiple people could agree on. My client got in. They bought up a bunch of the shares in the organization. They tried to get equity in the organization other ways and share classes, and they tried to get a little bit of joint venture. They weren't able to do that, but they were able to secure the shares at a very favorable price. And then when it was in the Wall Street Journal, all of a sudden, that this particular manufacturer was the theme between many different popular companies, they shot through the roof. Now, I didn't follow the client made a bunch of money and he got out and got into other things, diversified from that point. I don't know how that company is doing today. Of course, I could look it up, but the larger point is it was the thread. Now, how did it become a story in the Wall Street Journal? Well, there are a variety of ways that kind of thing can happen. But the key is he got in, the client got in first using analysis and research to find companies that were breakout. Now, I don't do this as a newsletter. I do this as a client basis, one-on-one. I want to teach you how you can do it yourself. If you've got questions on how to profit from any situation, by simply looking at the perspectives of the players, the contributing factors, evidencing those things along a spectrum, then developing an understanding of where the overlap is so that you can go from an equilibrium to find out where there could be fluctuations, supply chain fluctuations, economic fluctuations, changes in regulatory issues, changes in economic perspective or social perspective. Well, then ask those questions at www.sustainablewealthsecrets.com. This doesn't have to be a highly technical analysis. In fact, I've met people who use Fibonacci sequences and they would simply, read a bunch of industry materials, write down the key themes and topics, and then go research companies along those themes and topics. It really can break down into what are the truths of the industry, what are the observed facts of the industry, and where do we have overlap that could potentially influence the outcomes. Folks, this is really something that's powerful. It's something that I've used myself. We used it in the silver market, and other clients have used it. Now, I'm not an investment advisor, and I'm only teaching the technique in which you can do this yourself. But if you're an investment advisor or a private investor or somebody even who wants to invest in land, then ask your questions at www.sustainablewealthsecrets, because this method puts you ahead of the trend. It puts you very early in the outcomes that you're looking for and helps you know when it's important to get out, and it helps you differentiate truth from this all mystery they do on the internet and then this mystery they do in the news to pipe up and hype up stocks. It's not just about stocks. It can be used in other situations to determine what's the right direction in making a decision, but it reveals that opportunity that is in chaos by solidifying that situation into a measurable and meaningful tool for decision making. Thanks for listening. I'm Justin Hitt with Sustainable Wealth Secrets. Visit me at www.sustainablewealthsecrets.com, and I'll be happy to answer your questions through that platform.